This morning we're going to be talking about living into the promises of Jesus, and that's the promise to shine, the promise to be a light to the world. I really like the way the bulletin article, the front of it, has the verse of John chapter 3, verse 21. Anytime during the sermon, just go ahead and read that. Some of you already are doing it now. I really like that translation of it. It was really good. So, we're going to be talking about living into the promises of Jesus and the promise that Jesus gave us to shine, to be a light to the world. Remember, Jesus said that a city on top of a hill is not meant to be hidden. Neither do you put a lamp on a stand and cover it up, but you let that light shine. And that's who we are supposed to be as God's people, are people that shine, are people that light up the place, are people that light up people that are struggling, that just need some light in their lives. Let me give you this story. Last week at Bible camp, I got to, by the way, if you ever want to go on a mission journey to see God at work, you need to come to Bible camp with me. Or you need to go to Green Valley one of the weeks, or you need to come to Little Prairie one of the other weeks. But you need to go to Bible camp. If you've not been to Bible camp in a long time, you're missing out. You're forgetting what's going on. Just ask Daryl Burke. She was there with me the whole week last week. Ask her about her experiences. I'm sure they're totally different than mine. But a week studying the Bible and studying it intensely with high school students is fun. It's really a whole lot of fun. Last week we got to Bible camp. It was about 2 weeks ago, actually. 2 weeks ago today, we got to Bible camp really late at Little Prairie Bible Camp in Rolla, Missouri. And the reason why we got there so late, according to our youth group, is time made us late. Because we were at Six Flags for Soul Lift all day. And so, the kids wanted to stay at Six Flags, and according to Dr. Younger, the kids wanted to stay at Six Flags all day. And so we got to Bible camp about 11 o'clock, where everybody else got there earlier in the day. And one of the things that I noticed when I got to camp is this young lady, we're going to call her Wren, because that was her nickname all week at camp. It was such an amazing name for her. Nice and short, because she was nice and short. And when we got there, I wondered if she was actually a camper, because I saw her and she looked young. She was crying. We got there that Sunday night, and she was distraught. She was wanting to call home. The first thing they do when they get to camp is all the phones are taken away from the campers there. And she wanted to call home. She missed home. She was just wanting to be home because camp wasn't a place she felt like she belonged. She was hurting. She didn't know what to do. She didn't know how she was supposed to act. She didn't know anybody in her cabin. She was distraught. She was lost and in a dark place. The next day on Monday, I got to watch her as they divided up teams. She was one of the ones I kind of paid attention to because I saw that on Sunday night. But Dub, who's actually here as the camp director, said something a little bit to me. He said, hey, we've got one girl named Wren who's just kind of feeling a little bit homesick. Can you kind of watch out for her? And I said, yeah, Dub, I'm sure I can do that. And I'll talk to some of our girl chaperones and see if they can help out as well. And I watched out for her during the day, and during the day she was on the phone every now and then. When it came to lunchtime, because the guys, of course, being the men that they should be, let the ladies go first, right? That really is how it is at Bible camp. It's awesome. They even hold the doors open for the ladies. It's really cool because Dub does such a good job teaching them how to be men, how to be righteous men. So the guys are waiting in the back in line, and I'm there with them. We're playing a game that's, I guess, kind of rough, called kill ball. But still, it's volleyball where you hit it at people. It's fun. You'll love it. Anyways, we're playing this game, and I can see through the door that Wren was already gone through line, and that she had sat down at a table, and she's kind of by herself, and just sad, distraught, in the dark, not feeling like she belonged, not knowing what to do, not knowing what drink to get out of the amazing amount of 5-gallon water coolers we have, all the drinks that are in there. You can just tell it she'd never been to camp before. She didn't know what to do, and she looked sad at lunchtime. But then I noticed something that was awesome. I noticed some young ladies start sitting by her. I noticed some of the young ladies started talking to her. One of them in particular is in our audience, and I'm so proud of her. Actually, two of them. I'm so proud of them. They sat by her and started talking to her. And I saw her starting to light up just a little bit. Instead of just looking at her food, now she was kind of looking from the top of her eyebrows, at the people as they were talking to her. And every now and then she would answer questions. But then I got mixed up with all the mass of all the people there, because once all the guys got in, the lunchroom was just full, and there was no way I could pay attention to what was going on anymore. But as that evening came, I saw Ren on the phone again, but not crying this time. I saw her on the phone, and I assumed she was talking to her mom or some family member that she was missing, and I saw her talking about camp and what she had done for the day, and the friends she's made, and the people that were with her. To make a long story short, as the week went, I just watched this young lady blossom. Found out she was 15 when I thought she was a whole lot younger than that. And I never really even talked to her. I didn't need to. Because the young people at camp shined. Their light for Christ was just glowing. They talked to her. They lifted her up. They included her in games, even times that she didn't feel like she was a part of it. And she just blossomed. And at the end of camp, she looked just like every other camper. She was full of joy. She wasn't on the phone every single day trying to call home, missing home. She was wanting to stay. She was singing. She was a light. And it was awesome. I bring up Ren because part of my thought as a youth minister is our youth are about to go back to school. Can you believe it or not? It's the middle of August, and school starts for many of them on Wednesday and Thursday. And when they go back to school, one of the things I encourage them is be lights. That it sounds a whole lot like the youth or the high school lunchroom. When everybody gets there the first day, nobody knows who's going to sit where. And then all of a sudden you've got the groups that just invade whole entire tables. You remember what it was like when you were in high school? How there were groups all over the place and how there were just outcasts that were in the dark. That didn't really fit in. That weren't sure what to do. Not sure who they were and who they were supposed to get along with, that were scared, that were in the dark, that were hurting. And you remember how in high school every now and then, even people that were popular were some of those people that sat by themselves at lunch? Because their day had just been hard, it had been broken, it had been bad. They weren't sure what to do. They didn't want anybody to be rude to them. They didn't want their friends to make the same jokes that they've been making, so they sat aside and they were scared. And I bring the sermon up because our youth are going to school, and it's going to happen, and I encourage you guys to be a light. When you go to college, when you go to your high school, when you go to your junior high, and for everybody else that's gone in the other back wing of our building, when they're in elementary schools and preschools and stuff like that, be lights. But church, adults that aren't in school anymore, the sermon's just for you as well. There are times our light has not shined when people have been around us that don't really fit in. Not sure what to do when they're here with us or when they're with us at our jobs. They're scared. Their day's been bad, or their week or month or years have been bad, and they just need a light to shine in their lives. They need somebody to notice them and just to talk to them and declare that Jesus is Lord. There's this amazing story that you've heard over and over again as a kid that's in Luke chapter 19. It's the story of Zacchaeus, but before we get into the story, we got to do a little bit of background check going on here in Luke. I believe Luke, like John, when he wrote his gospel, he wrote it with themes involved. There are things that Luke very pointedly puts together in order to make sure that we get a message out of a lot of stories rather than just one. And often when we study the story of Zacchaeus, we just study it and sing our song to our little kids about how Zacchaeus was a wee little man and a wee little man was he. And we sing this song and we get the fact that this guy was an outcast, that he was a tax collector, a chief of tax collectors nonetheless, and that he hid in a tree and Jesus called him down and loved on him. But we miss the whole backstory. The backstory begins in Luke chapter 18, verse 31. If you have your Bibles, you can kind of turn there. I'm not going to read all these verses. I'm just going to kind of mention what's going on for us as we get into Luke chapter 19. But in Luke chapter 18, verse 31, Jesus gets in front of his apostles and he says, guys, it's time. My time has come. I'm going to Jerusalem. And when I go to Jerusalem, they're going to kill me. Let's go. And so finally, Peter, who's been sticking his foot in his mouth and said, no, Lord, never. I'll never let them kill you. Finally, Peter's just going. And they get on the road, and on the way from where they were at, they get on the road and they have to go through Jericho. Now, Jericho is really interesting as we think about the story of Zacchaeus, because we have to think of the story of Jericho in God's total story. Remember when Jericho first began in your mind? Remember when you first learned of Jericho, the history of it? Do you remember when the walls came down? How the Israelites came into Israel. Their whole goal was to be a covenant people of God, to be the people that God has set aside, to be the light to the nations, to shine. To whenever there's a foreigner in the land, as the adults have studied about this morning, whenever there's a foreigner in the land, treat them as one of your own. And they get into this promised land where they're supposed to, you can look at this multiple ways, and this is the way I see it. Their job was to kick out all the bad influences of the promised land so that way they could be the good influence. And let God do the work. Just trusting God in that. I really believe that the whole goal of God was for everybody to be scared and flee from the promised land. Because of the things that God does and the way that people respond to it. And so the very first battle is the Battle of Jericho. They get into there, and they march around for 6 days, and on the seventh day, they march around 7 times. They blow the trumpets, the Israelites scream out, and the walls come down. And God wins the victory for them, the battle for them. And in the midst of that victory, that promise that God has of God's people being his people, God tells them, never build on this foundation. This is mine. Everything that is here is mine. Give it all to me, because I am God. You can have everything else. This 1%. This little amount is for me. Don't build on it. And then later on, we find that the Israelites decide to build on it. The guy that builds on it does it at the expense of 2 sons, if I remember right. The building of the foundation and the building of the walls. He loses 2 sons because of the curse God has made. This is the city of Jericho. This is where Zacchaeus is from. It's a city of curse. It's a city of destruction. It's a city of darkness. A city where people don't exactly fit in because they're away from Jerusalem. They're away from the temple. They're a little bit far. They're on the outskirts. They just don't fit in. And as Jesus goes to Jerusalem, he ends up passing through Jericho. And on the way into Jericho, he sees a blind man. And the blind man calls out to him and says, "Heal me." And Jesus' own apostles, knowing what Jesus is about to do, because he just promised, tell him, "Be quiet. Don't yell out at him." And Jesus heals this man because of this man's faith and opens up his eyes and lets the guy see light. Please notice that. Please notice before the story of Zacchaeus, as Jesus is going into Jericho, he heals a man and brings him to the light. Just notice that. And then we end up in Luke chapter 19, verse 1. Jesus enters into Jericho and was just passing through. I find it interesting that the Son of God, the same God that had the Israelites pass through Jericho in a sense when they circled it, and the walls came crumbling down, the Son of God on his way to being the propitiation for our sins, for being the perfect sacrifice, the making of the covenant right, is willing to pass through Jericho. The same place that God destroyed, Jesus comes through to build up. He passes through Jericho. And behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus there. He was a chief tax collector and was very rich. And he was seeking to see who Jesus was. But on account of the crowd, he could not. See, first of all, after Jesus heals this blind man and he's able to see light, everybody starts praising God and starts following him. So as Jesus comes in to Jericho, this man named Zacchaeus says, "Hey, I need to see what's going on here. I need to figure out what's going on." And his backstory is just as messed up as the story of Jericho. If Zacchaeus is a Jewish man, which I believe he is because of his name, if he's a Jewish man, he's one of the most despicable Jewish men during the time, because he's in league with the Romans. The Roman Empire had a way of keeping its people down. They knew exactly how much to tax people and how much the people that taxed would take out for their own pocketbooks. So they would say tax the people this much, and they would expect that the tax people, the chief tax collectors, would take out even more, so that way that their pocketbooks could get filled, and that way they would keep doing their job well for the Roman Empire. And if they did it just right, the people would never rebel because they would never have enough wealth to do it. They could never fight against Rome because they didn't know if they were going to have enough food if everybody went to war. The Romans had it well. And Zacchaeus decided to give in to the Roman way. Not only does he live in Jericho, but nobody likes him. Nobody's been talking to him. When he sits down for dinner, it's usually just him and his family, if his family will have him. He's in the darkness. He's broken. He needs the light. Because Zacchaeus was small in stature, he ran on ahead and climbed up into a sycamore tree to see Jesus. For he was about to pass that way. And when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to Zacchaeus, "Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today." I find this really interesting. I love this picture that somebody drew. It's kind of hard to see. It's an older picture, but it's really neat if you look at it. Jesus is here in the red, if you guys can see him. He's the one with his hand up to Zacchaeus. And then Zacchaeus is up in the tree over here, and kind of looking like a monk. I like the way he's clothed. But Jesus is walking. There's a group of people around him. They're in a sycamore orchard. They're coming into Jericho, and Zacchaeus is up there. And Jesus is filled with people's voices, filled with people saying, "Hey, come and talk to me. Let's talk about hunting." I don't know if Jesus talked about hunting, but if it was me, it would be, let's talk about life. Let's talk about what you did last. Let's talk about things that we love. Jesus, are you going to be our Savior? Jesus, do you remember when God made the walls fall? Actually, they probably didn't bring that up because they were probably scared what Jesus is going to do. But still, Jesus is walking. He's got all this stuff going on around him. People inviting him to dinner. People inviting him to hang out. People wanting to be healed. People praising him for healing the blind guy. And Jesus, in the midst of all this commotion, looks up to Zacchaeus and says, "Zacchaeus, come down. I'm going to eat at your house today." Brothers and sisters, I'm just as bad as all of us are on this one. As a youth minister, on Wednesday nights, when we have our meals, I have 100 voices hitting me at once. I mean, just walking to get a drink, all of you guys are trying to say hi to me. Somebody's trying to talk to me about a work project that needs to be done. Somebody else is trying to talk to me about where my daughter is or my wife is. You get, just so much commotion's going on. You know what it's like. It happens to you. My focus is to focus on the teens. I mean, that's what you guys commissioned me for as a minister. You guys brought me here and said, "Ty, we want you to help us take care of the teens here." And so on Wednesday nights as we're at our meals, my focus is, hey, are there any teens around that I'm not aware of that aren't in the group? I'm watching out for them. But you know what happens? I miss people that probably need more ministry at that moment than others. People that are sitting in our midst, sometimes it's me, who are just broken, in the dark, hurting, had a bad day, and needs to see the light. If Jesus walked in our midst, he would do a whole lot different than we do in our meals. He would listen to everybody. He would be joyous because he was man full of joy. But at the same time, he'd be paying attention to letting his light shine. Because that's why he came into the world, was to let his light shine. And the people that were in our midst that needed him most, he would be there for. And that's what he's called us out to be as well. Church, there's nothing wrong with having groups, having special people that you connect with, that you fellowship with. There's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes our meals look like high school lunchrooms. I'm being honest. Sometimes there's a group sitting that isn't very big in number that's not really talking because they don't know what's going on. They're new. They're wondering if they can be a part. By the way, there's some really powerful advice in evangelism that I've learned over the last 2 years that we all need to know and we need to get into our heads if we're going to be the people of Christ that shine the light. People don't believe anymore until they belong. Let me say that again. People do not believe until they belong. It's hard to follow Jesus when you don't feel like the people of Jesus like you. When you're sitting by yourself in the dark. and you don't know what's going on. The drinks are so far on the other side of the room that you don't even know where they are. You notice that people sit down and get up and get dessert and then come back and sit down, and you wonder why everybody didn't just get everything at one time like I do. And it's hard. But then you start belonging when somebody sits down with you and says, hey, I'm so-and-so. Who are you? I'm really thankful you're here. And you shine the light on them, and you shine the light to each other, because it even happens in the midst of us. Like I've said, there's been times I've been in the dark where I just need somebody to come and love on me and shine on me, because my day was bad. And Jesus sees Zacchaeus in a place where, the hunters in the room know, you get up in a tree, it's harder to see people up there, isn't it? That's why you guys are trying to get deer from that direction. Deer don't look up all the time, neither do humans. We're almost always looking down, looking at the people around us, making sure we don't trip. But Jesus notices him. And that's who Jesus has called us out to be, is people that look up and do this. I love what Jesus does. So Zacchaeus gets down, he hurries, and comes down and receives Jesus joyfully. And we find out a little bit more information. Just for sake of time, I didn't write it up there. But Zacchaeus tells Jesus that if I've wronged anybody, I will pay him back 4 times. I will pay him back. And Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, behold, Lord, the half of my goods I give to the poor. And Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house, since he also is a son of Abraham. Remember, Zacchaeus has joined the way of the Romans to be a chief tax collector. And what does Jesus call him? You're a child of the promise. You're a child of the light. I've called you out to be that. And I love what Jesus says at the end of this, at the end of the story. For the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. So one of the things Jesus says that's really powerful, that John is the only gospel writer to record, shows up in John chapter 3, verse 21. I love what Jesus says. This is after he gets done talking to Nicodemus, a man that comes to him in the darkness, by the way. He comes to him at night. And Jesus shines the light on him, and he says this at the end of this long speech. But whoever does what is true, or whoever lives into the truth, lives in the light. They come to the light, so that it may be clearly seen that his works have been carried out in God. Jesus is the light, and he's taught us how to be the light through small stories like Zacchaeus. Well, I think Zacchaeus is a small story because I often think of flannel board Zacchaeus. We don't tend to talk about it very much on Sunday mornings, but the truth is that Jesus has pointed us the way of who we're supposed to be as God's people, are people that even in the midst of all the commotion, all the love, all the fellowship that's going on, are people that shine light in the darkness, are people that share their lives with people that need life shared with, are people that spend time with people like Ren. I got another story to tell you about that happened at camp. This one's kind of interesting because this young man named Noah was awesome. He was in my cabin. Me and a guy named Jonathan White were the counselors of our cabin, and Jonathan was doing a fantastic job of all week. Dub kept pulling me aside at night whenever we would have cabin devotionals. Dub was getting me to come and help him do work because we had to do things like get our paintball gun duck shooting thing together for Duck Dynasty Day and stuff like that. And so the first 3 nights of the week, I was just busy. I wasn't able to spend time with my cabin, but I got to know Noah a little bit because he slept underneath me, and he was quiet, and it was awesome. Noah was just an awesome guy that was full of joy, full of life, but he didn't really fit in. He was kind of awkward and gangly and not very yay sports, because one of the big things for the guys at camp all week was they had new soccer goals. And all the guys wanted to do was play soccer. And all Noah wanted to do was not play soccer. And so I got to know Noah a little bit, but not very much. Until I think it was Wednesday night. T-Bone, did you speak Wednesday night? It was Wednesday night. T-Bone spoke after we did this amazing skit where it's called Doing the Sounds of Jesus, and we had all the campers close their eyes. It was dark and there was a full moon. We started from the Garden of Gethsemane and went all the way to the resurrection from the tomb, and we did the sounds. We acted out all the parts while their eyes were closed. It was really neat. And then T-Bone got up there and gave the sermon that he gave at church here on that Sunday night, which was it's a story of loss, of losing his grandparents, and how Jesus gave him victory in the midst of that loss. And I got back to my cabin defeated. Not for any bad reason. I was just tired. I was defeated. I was the voice of Jesus during that time that we did that. And I cried out in pain, and I almost lost my voice, and there was just a bunch of stuff going on in my heart thinking about what Jesus did for me, why I acted like him and made the sounds that I think he would have made. And it was rough. I was tired, and I got back to my cabin and said, all right, guys, let's have a cabin devo, and let's make it quick. And Noah speaks up, and I said, hey, does anybody have anything they want to share? Anything that they've learned today that they want to talk about? Anybody want to go to bed so I can get some sleep? And Noah spoke up, and he said, yeah, I have a lot of loss in my life. I've lost my grandparents, and what T-Bone talked about really made me think about that. And what Noah brought up was, all this loss has made me think about the loss of people that are around me, about how they've experienced loss. And I want to be there for them. This young man that just didn't seem to fit in very well with everybody said, I want to be a light. He didn't say it in that terms, but that's what he was meaning. Said, I just want to be a light. I want to be there for them, because whenever anybody loses anyone, it's rough. It makes babies cry. It's rough. And Noah says, I just want to be there for them and love them. Have any of you guys experienced loss? Let's talk about it. And let's remember the truth that Jesus died for everyone. And he died for us to share Jesus with them, even in the midst of hurting from loss. And it was so neat to watch Noah shine. It was so neat to watch Noah light up in the midst of hurting from remembering his own grief, his own torture from losing loved ones after T-Bone gave such an excellent sermon. And it was awesome to watch this young man step up and say, Ty, you don't want to give a devotional, but I'll give one. We need to love on people that are suffering from loss, especially those that don't look like it. And he said it pretty clearly. He said, all throughout this week, you didn't even know that I was struggling with this. But I am. And I need you guys to pray for me, and I'll pray for you in the loss that you've experienced. And it was so cool to watch his light shine. In Isaiah chapter 60, verse 1, Isaiah calls out the people of Israel to be a light. He says this, Arise, Jerusalem, let your light shine for all to see, for the glory of the Lord rises to shine on you. In Philippians chapter 2, Paul calls out the church in Philippi, a church that's doing very well, by the way. A church that doesn't really have any problems except for a little bit of struggle between two ladies. And he calls them out and says, you guys need to shine like stars, because that's who God has made you. He's made you to be lights. He's made you to shine and be a light in the dark place for the wrens that come to camp and don't really feel like they fit in. He's called you to be those people, to shine. And in Philippians, Paul says, do it without grumbling. Do it without saying, oh, hey guys, I can't eat with you today because there's somebody over there and I'm going to go talk to them. And do it without grumbling, without complaining. Do it because it's who we're called to be. We are blessed to shine. The promise of Jesus is this for us, church. We are a people that light the world because Jesus already has. We're reflecting his glory every time we shine, every time we share truth with others, every time we lift them up in the midst of their suffering, in the midst of their loss like Noah did. Every time we share our lives with girls like Ren, that they're just homesick. They don't really fit in. Every time. Church, that's who God has called us out to be. And when we're not doing that, we're not being Christ-like. Because people struggle with following Jesus until they belong. Church, we've been called out to be people that make others feel like they belong. When there's a foreigner in our midst, as Moses told the people of Israel in Leviticus, to treat them as our own. To love them. As Jesus said, hey, whenever you go down to a banquet, don't take the seat of high honor. First, take the seat in the back. Give everybody else the position of high honor. And if somebody should lift you up and you should be praised, give glory to God in that. That's who we should be, church. We should be a people that love in just amazing ways that our light shines. We have been blessed by the promises of Jesus. And the promise of Jesus for us today and for the rest of our lives is this: shine. Share with others that are in the darkness. And when you are in the darkness, here's a humble one that we all need to get through our thick skulls. When we're in the darkness and our day is rough and we're struggling, we're really struggling to connect with Jesus and have joy, let other people shine on you. Let other people reflect glory of God to you and absorb it. Don't grumble. Don't be pretentious. Another word for the week, T-Bone. Don't struggle in it, but shine. Stand up with joy and declare that Jesus is Lord and that we are one big family of God. And when we get to heaven, we're going to be one really huge family of God. And then I'll be able to remember everybody's names, and it's going to be awesome. But until then, shine. Let's be joy to people. Let's lift up Jesus in amazing ways. Let's be like Christ, and whenever we're walking around, wherever we're going, sure, we're going to keep our eyes down, we're going to try not to stumble, and we're going to talk to the people that are near us, but let's also look for the people that are hidden, that are trying to be out of place because they're hurting. They're in the dark. They're struggling. Church, I encourage you to shine.